technology, job titles are pretty crazy these days. In fact, there's a Silicon Valley job title creator on Tumblr, like Reddit superintendent, or information pioneer, or sales qualification sage. I know, pretty silly and pretty random, but that's Silicon Valley, right? There used to be a structure, a reason. For example, the C-suite was limited to the CEO, the CFO, the CPO, the CMO, and the CSO. Then there's the Chief Information Security Officer. So what would be a cool C-suite title? How about Chief Hacking Officer? You know, hey, I'm John Smith, Chief Hacking Officer for the Acme Company. Well, what do you do, John, at the Acme Company as Chief Hacking Officer? Well, I hack. Okay, what else do you do? Well, what should I do? I just hack. Actually, though, the job, it would be a bit more than that. And I'm sure most people have heard of at least one real-life Chief Hacking Officer. That would be Kevin Mitnick. He used this job title at a few companies, and it fits. Kevin, he was gifted at the art of hacking. Running spreadsheets? Probably not so much. So at RSAC this year, I was offered the chance to talk to a Chief Hacking Officer for a new OT security startup. And I jumped at the chance. Hacking OT as your job title? How cool is that? And did it have anything to do with Kevin Mitnick? Well, it turns out it did. This is a story about a Chief Hacking Officer who draws on his experience in physical and virtual security assessments, along with some intuitive AI-driven coding to safeguard operational technology. I'm Robert Famosi. This is Error Code.
I am Colin Murphy, Chief Hacking Officer for Frenos and Mitnick Security. Frenos is a digital twin AI-enabled adversarial or threat modeling tool, and we're ingesting information across OT networks and products and doing what a red teamer would do at a magnitude, 1,000x, a millionx, really there's no limit. Mitnick Security is Kevin Mitnick's consulting company, boutique. We really selective on those customers. And after he passed, we're continuing the legacy and working closely with the same team and his wife.
So we'll start with Frenos, and I'll get to Mitnick Security in a bit. OT, well, it runs the gamut from things that were installed in the field 30 years ago and have very limited resources to very modern appliances today, which are probably running commodity operating systems, and they have robust memories. How does a company span that with its assessments?
So, we bring in segmentation data, so we understand that, basically the topology across all of the systems. We bring in asset information, both vulnerability information, and so we're partnering with the tools that already exist. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel across the entire industry, but we want to solve that single pane of glass and the threat analysis and model. Right, so we take all of that in, and that's what we call the digital twin.
A digital twin is a virtual representation of a physical object, process, or system that can be digitized, mirroring its properties, condition, and behavior. It uses real-time data, simulation, and modeling to reflect the performance of its physical counterpart.
We create, using Graph, right, a model of the segmentation, we could the assets, and we have vulnerability and system information. Now our AI agent models attack scenarios trained on adversarial groups, TTPs, everything.
So with OT segmentation, is that done through security controls?
The operations aspect of it is handled in other tools. We just want to look at the adversarial tap pads.
Okay, so Frenos is focused on the threat. And exactly what are they trying to identify?
I love assume breach. and people started implementing assume breach in their their tabletop exercises, their security plans, it became more realistic. A perimeter, it does a lot of the work, but the minute someone opens an email that they shouldn't or has an unpatched device, they just brought the threat over the line.
And the TTPs that they're identifying, it's probably coming from, say, the MITRE attack or a variety of different sources? Or is it proprietary information?
We have partnerships and we get information that's easily available. But then we also do our own research and we go find things that are out there in the for the dark bet or other communities, sensor information, and we'll build our own proprietary adversary fingerprints, if you will.
So are there particular industries that are focused on this now?
Energy.
And is that a result of a particular uptick in attacks on energy, or is it just that they're more advanced?
I would have answered this differently 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was like, the energy's way in they're so Vegas. I think that they are responding to new threats. They are moving towards the bleeding edge of technology where they can and trying to figure out ways that they can protect and identify those 20-year-old systems or Fortinets from 3 years ago that never got patched.
So Colin just introduced the name of a router, and there's a couple of them out there that have been identified. In fact, CISA has called out particular models as having particularly strong issues that need to be patched ASAP. Was it because we haven't really looked at the industry before, and now all of a sudden these things are bubbling up?
I think it didn't have the attention it deserved. So now I think there's more focus on it, or it's bubbling up. The threats and the vulnerabilities have always existed. Sure.
Yeah, it's not like the vulnerabilities were created yesterday. Yeah, no. But the expectation, it's been different with OT. The threat model was different.
They had I feel like the industry had a false sense of security because it wasn't well understood. So kind of like the Apple-Microsoft argument, right? It used to be everyone thought Microsoft had all the vulnerabilities just because there was more of them. So IT's face, we thought in this industry, IT's face is where those attacks and the focus was going to. But OT's massive.
Yeah, security by obscurity, that doesn't work. We know that. So did Colin do research on routers, firewalls, etc.?
Yeah, so in mid-January, 15,000 Fortinet firewall configurations were released on the dark web. They got posted. Within days, the credentials from them, your VPN users in those configurations, almost all of the credentials were cracked. So they're hashed in the policy or in the configuration. So not only did they post the configurations, they then started posting the credentials for these firewalls, VPN access, etc. We got a hold of those configurations. I started digging into them and going, what's the attribution? Where do these belong? What business was impacted by this? What industry was impacted by this? And so I started looking specifically for OT. And surprisingly, there was a lot of power generation, DCS, mod plus protocol built into these policies. And then I started seeing things like power and generation, and it went deeper and deeper and deeper. We normally wouldn't care about that. That's not something that they're going to expose to the internet. But if I have configuration data, VPN information, you cracked credentials, and now reading the policy, I know what's behind the perimeter.
What Colin is saying is that by looking at the dumped credentials, he can find industries that are affected by the breach. And in this case, they were in power and energy.
So now you kind of build this attack chain and go, I know who my targets would be.
So if you've identified the breach victims, how about the vendors who made the leaky devices? How are they receiving this information? Has Colin been able to work with them, or is it still kind of a difficult task because the vendors themselves are not used to security vulnerabilities?
Disclosure is still tough. I feel like that is a problem that should have been solved by now for us, and it has. As a researcher, I have a problem every year. I'll get disclosure, put it out there. No one does anything with it. So I think that they're doing a better job. Like Fortinet has tried to contact customers they could identify and say, hey, your firewall's exposed. It's been backdoored. You were in a breach. But that's only if the customers are keeping in touch with or providing information that identifies the firewall and configuration backsheets. A lot of these devices are outdated or unpatched. The licenses are probably, 3 years old, 5 years old, so they're out of service as well.
And the end user probably doesn't want to engage with the vendor at that point. For some, it's going to cost them some money, I bet, for them to call up and say, hey, am I one of the people that are impacted? They'll be like, yeah, sure. And for a new service agreement, we'll give you the update.
When I joined Frenos 4 weeks ago, right? That's the irony. Before that, I was put no before. What's nice with working with the Mitnick security team and another business is there's always things I can apply both. Like there's nice overlay. And so the research and red team engagements I do at Mitnick Security translates usually into something in a product that I'm helping you develop. So at Frenos, as Chief Hacking Officer, I straddle engineering, product, and operations. And I get to kind of play in all those areas and tilt the hat to Kevin Mitnick, since that was his title at KnowBe4 and Mitnick Security. So it was kind of he was a important part of my life and what I've done in this industry. And so I'm going to show that respect.
Okay. For some reason at this year's RSAC, people pulled me aside in the hallway and wanted to know more about Kevin Mitnick. Well, I spent about 3 years working on a book with Kevin, The Art of Invisibility, which is timely because it's how to disappear online. I'll cut to the chase. Very hard to do. Probably can't do it. Anyway, people are interested in that topic now. Disappearing online, kind of important. It's coming up on 3 years now since he passed, and I suspect that it's probably an appropriate amount of time for people to reflect upon his work and his enduring legacy in the security field. If you don't know, Kevin had his own company for years, doing boutique security assessments. And many of the stories from Art of Invisibility were inspired by real-life events. Kevin provided enough vague outlines for which I was able to embellish and then provide color in the book. So, the work that Colin has been doing for Frenos, is it different than the work he was doing at Mitnick Security, or still is?
Mitnick Security was Kevin's idea of how to legally hack and get paid and contribute back to the community. That was his original idea. And so he would find interesting groups and companies to work with and engage in technology and industry. And because he was selected, we kept a very kind of boutique operation. And he would work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. He had no need or reason to, but that was his passion. And so we always made sure that we delivered a robust, engagement. We covered, the scope was one thing, and then we'd go back to the customer and say, hey, we're done with that. We got in. We have them in, but you have these other systems or these acquisitions. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. And so we always ended up getting a report back that was, so much larger than what originally we were engaged with them. And they came back every year. And we probably got the most satisfaction out of getting harder and harder. Right? You do a red team engagement, you try again in 2 years, and they're like, oh, I haven't had time, I had no budget. We'd keep in touch. They'd join the Slack, and sometimes it'd be way before the next engagement. They'd say, hey, I have this idea in Zero Trust. What do you think about this? And so that was kind of why we stayed boutique, because that doesn't scale. Right. And so we made sure we had good customers in all the different industries we liked. So oil and gas, manufacturing, automotive, healthcare, SaaS companies who bring us in to test their web applications or their networks.
So this is where our conversation gets really interesting. Colin has boots on the ground experience hacking in large retail store chains. He cites one example.
I have some really fun stories on social engineering engagements where the scope was everything, but it started with me pushing a stroller through a mall to a retail store with my kids and installing a device in a public area so that my team around the world could tunnel through that device, do a wireless attack against storefront, travel from there, non-segmented flat network. They fixed that beautifully after the fact. But we went from that storefront And here in the US, we were able to go anywhere else in the world, 2 hops. So we were in their London storefront, we were in their AWS, we were in their enterprise, we had their ERP CRM systems. I mean, it started with my kids in a stroller, and they're a very large organization. They got that report back, and they made significant changes. We tested them 2 other times, and it kept getting harder and harder. That's what we want.
So I hear these stories a lot, and then I think, well, most people will probably think that doesn't really happen in the real world. But Colin, he can tell you that it does. It involves a little bit of social engineering, and it involves a little bit about putting devices in places. Anyway, that flat network, yeah, that's everywhere. So would Colin recommend a job like that to somebody? I mean, it sounds really cool to be out in the field and to get up from your keyboard and actually go to a shopping mall and start doing this stuff in real life.
Amazing. I think that if you're really passionate about reverse engineering, cybersecurity, like over the top passionate, I think it's the perfect job, right? If you want to write exploits and reverse engineer web applications, then you have your niche, right? You're gonna stay in that, and that's going to be your career, and you're going to contribute and do talks on it. But this broader approach, I mean, it also, the social engineering in going in first uncovers threats that get missed a lot of the time. You red team engagements.
Right. Because you're in the real world now.
You won't see, these are, in some cases, there's hundreds of thousands of assets of these networks. What you see with code and scanning was completely different if you walk up and you see, a hit card reader or a Ethernet port on the wall. You go, wait, where does that go? Right. What's on the other side of that? In my background as a CIO, I know that it probably goes somewhere that someone forgot to unhook it from, and it's on the wrong VLAN, and there's no NAC on it. And so now, an attacker could plug in and then suddenly they're taking you down to the CEO's office virtually. So,
and oftentimes these companies forget things. Oh, did we have security cameras? They forget about, well, whatever. And you see that when you're on-prem as part of the reconnaissance and you're walking around, you're kicking the tires, you're seeing what's actually there, and you put that into your assessment. Then you go back to the client and say, we found this and this and this. And they're like, oh, did we have these things to begin with?
Yeah. A great example is there was this is a little bit different because they came back and said, oh, wow, thank you for telling us. Also, that's no longer in scope. It was going to make the test too easy to jump from that into where we wanted to go. But it was a digital reporter that was open to the public WAN, default credentials, and you could do a code injection on it and get a reverse shell. So now you're already on the network. You have a place to move, horizontally from.
And then there's good old social engineering, which is definitely an in-person assessment.
That more, we had an engagement where I wasn't going in to test the technology. I went in to an employee that had just been terminated a week prior, and I showed up with a fake badge and a lanyard and a polo, and I said, hey, I'm really sorry what happened. I'm here. I'm a courier. I'm going to take your assets back to the company. She gave me 2 sheets of paper with every credential she could remember from the business and the laptop, and I had her sign a fake form, and I left with it. And the customer came back. They got the end engagement report. They were like, well, that's a different problem for us to solve. Yeah. How did you know? Well, for LinkedIn. And she happened to be local, so it was easy for me to just go there and view that.
So again, Mitnick Security is a small company. It still exists. His wife, Kimberly, is running it now. And I guess it's kind of cool to talk to somebody who's on the inside.
The thing that, something I could expand on that I hear in the community a lot. If you don't know Kevin and you look from 10,000 feet, you go, he hasn't done much, right? He's not really hacking anymore, which we don't see that. And I didn't know that or see it until I worked directly with him. You couldn't be further from the truth. You didn't see it because he was always working. He was always hacking. He was always in those systems. And anyone that's worked with Kevin over the last 8 years, we all have the same joke. Are you there? Because if you got that message on your phone and you responded, you were going to go either into an hour conversation or a 24-hour conversation. every single time.
So I had that experience. He would call me from like a taxi cab in Las Vegas and be like, "Hey, I had a great idea. We should probably add this to the book. Are you writing it down?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm recording it, Kev. No problem. What's the idea?" And we get this great story, and a lot of it made it into the book. So yeah, I mean, he was constantly working.
I give credit to this industry, to people caring about security, to what he did. I mean, it was early days, but it created what we have today. And I remember as a young kid going down a similar path as Kevin here in the Bay Area where I grew up. And when he went away, when they caught him, I went, crap, how do I keep doing this, but for good? There was no path to this at the time. You were a computer science major, a Cisco engineer, your business degree, right? Like, or you just wrote code. And here we are, it's a massive industry with so much opportunity.
It wasn't just Kevin. There was also Kevin Poulsen, and there was also Lori Love. There were a bunch of people at that time who were entrapped in the system that didn't really understand that personal hacking is different from the type of criminal hacking that we see today. So I know Colin's only been at Frenos for a couple weeks. Anything else that he's experienced in the OT world as chief hacking officer?
Like I said, I'm very passionate about this. So when I'm not working, I'm working, which is nice. It's all play for me, right? No matter what I'm doing. So the Fortinet research kind of led me down the path of going, what's out there? What protocols are used to manage all these different types of devices in these networks? So not looking at the hardware, but Erlang OTP, another CVE. Under 5 minutes, I'd weaponize that into reverse shell. Those types of things are now what I'm looking into. I haven't disclosed it yet because I'm still doing the research on it, but I have a 0-day for drop bear SSH. 19 million devices exposed on Shodan. It is in modems in people's homes. It is in industrial control systems. It's everywhere. Using a Claude and kind of knowing where to look in these libraries, I had a working exploit in under 2 hours.
So let me see if I understand that correctly. You're actually using vibe coding to do reverse engineering?
I found the bug and had a working exploit in under 2 hours. And it's a memory corruption, right? So I've been in 4 weeks. This has all been in 4 weeks. And it's amazing. Like I'm excited to be part of the OT community, and I'm learning from so many great people already. It's different, it's challenging for me, which I think really drives me to find ways to contribute and build really good products. That's really good to tell, right?
Okay, AI models will vary, and yes, so long as it's going to speed up the process, I was thinking about, capture the flag, and how AI would be really changing the scenario because they're doing king of the hill and reacting in the moment. They're just like throwing stuff off to their AI model, and it's coming back with,
Yesterday, I was at Hack the Day. Okay, while I was watching some great speakers, I went, I never get to do CTFs. I'm going to do CTF. I was able to... One thing I'm not a developer. I can hack code, I'll reverse engineer, I'll write attack tools, but sitting down and writing a robust application is not my skill set. So I went through each challenge and would get the binaries and really set up the prompt to do what I would normally do, but it would take me hours and tool sets and, a path, the sequence, automation. Instead, I told the AI agent what to do and said, go run on this. This is what I expect to happen. Or, hey, I see these combinations of files. I think it's, it's a block cipher. And it would come back in what it would take me hours. Of all of the challenges, I think I got to, then I had to leave. I got through about 90% of. And some were very complex. Now, you have to have the background to prompt it. You can't just paste it in there for the harder ones, but this is probably the most impactful thing. Because as I left there, I went, what does this mean for the industry? What does this mean for the area? And for the past 20 years, I've been saying, I think everyone's been saying, we're lucky there's not enough bad guys because the world is vulnerable. Systems are vulnerable. We'll always have these types of things. There's just not enough bad people out there exploiting it. Or critical infrastructure would just fail. Now with AI, it just took 10 bad people with bad intentions and made them as strong as 100,000. Right? And as every day, these advances make it easier for a very small group to become as powerful as a nation state. That's what we're up against.
So we're talking about exponential growth here. I mean, so the window is not like 10 years out. The window is like 2 years.
As those skill sets are developed, and it's our responsibility as citizens, as a community, as cyber workers to use AI. Now the blue team, now the defenders and the engineers have to keep pace. We have to keep that momentum. So what comes with that for us is we don't just get to do whatever we want and break systems. We have to have proper GRC and compliance. We have to trust and understand the model we're using, whereas the bad guys don't have to do that. They don't have those controls in place. We have a tough job.
I'd like to thank Colin for coming on the show and talking about his work at Frenos and also at Mitnick Security. So being a chief hacking officer is not all fun and games, but it's also not sitting around on a keyboard and staring at pivot tables and budgets. It's a bit of boots on the ground, plus a lot of curiosity and a lot of poking around and finding out what works and what doesn't. I'm reminded of that song by Cole Porter and George Gershwin. You know, it's nice work if you can get it. Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I've got some great episodes coming up. We'll have more on Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and hacking utilities supply chains. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.